Recently, I got into a conversation on the topic of writing a long book where there's a lot of buildup and then a bunch of stuff kind of hits at the end. And I was talking about how I didn't have much confidence to pull off this type of book where like you get to really know the characters in the world before all the crazy stuff goes down. I only recently kind of started to feel more confident in building up those little bits of tension slowly and like letting people get to know the characters first. It feels like it can be a very hard thing to pull off. And my friend was asking me like, what do you think changed that you feel better about writing these types of books? And I think a lot of it is in the subconscious way I've set up the characters. That there's more inherent qualities in the characters I've been writing to carry them through the book. And in another recent video, I mentioned how my favorite character to write is my character Alfred because of 3 different qualities that he has as a character that make him particularly appealing to write about, especially in a long-term kind of way. He's the type of character where I really want to write like a long series about him. Some characters I love, but I only have like 1 book. Like Doll Girl Meets Dead Guy, I absolutely adored every moment of writing that book. I loved Sorla and Dor, but when the story was over, I was done. I don't have anything else to say about them except in maybe like they pop in as like cameo characters because I just feel like their story is pretty cut and dry. They are having a happy little life with a few bumps along the road, but not enough to really like write a book about. So I wanted to talk about what it is about Alfred, or really any character that makes a longer series really work or a long book work. And what I've realized are the qualities that maybe aren't the only things, but certainly can help with compelling character development. Oftentimes when you see an author pull off a long series, you can tell it's because they really love the main character and they have a lot to say about them and can send them on a lot of different adventures or give their plot, their growth, a lot of twists and turns. Not every character can support that. What is it that makes a character that type of character for an author? When I was younger, I think I thought that it was just if the character was somebody that I found cool or sexy or charming, relatable, maybe something I aspire to or want to escape into, maybe, you know, like somebody who always has a great comeback for every situation when I never have a great comeback for any situation, or they're just really hilarious, you know, all the kind of like fun stuff that makes a character enjoyable. Those things are important, but I have a lot of characters that I just enjoy in that kind of way. Like I'm just like, oh, he's hot and he's funny and he's fun to write. That's still not enough to carry them through a long book or a long series. What is it that makes you feel like I must keep writing about this character? I'm not done. I pinpointed 3 elements about Alfred that make him my favorite. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I've been making my living as a writer since 2009. I've been traditionally published, I've been indie published, I've written to market, I'm currently not writing to market. All this experience has given me a lot of my own past works to look back on and think, why did this work and why did this not work? And the first thing that a really good character needs is a goal. This is like writing advice 101. The minute you crack open any writing book, they're going to tell you that your main character needs a goal. Even if it's a subtle one. Like I'm currently reading the manga Silver Spoon by Hiromu Arakawa, who is better known for Full Metal Alchemist, but I'm really enjoying Silver Spoon, which is about a high school student who goes to an agricultural school because he just wants to get away from his parents and he's somewhat aimless and he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. The manga pretty much explicitly has him state, I don't really know what I want to do. I don't have a goal. But very early on, we, the reader, find out that he wanted to get away from his parents, and that was his reason for attending the school. So there's a goal, getting away from your parents. That makes you want to know, why did he want to get away from his parents? And also because he's just a nice guy. You want to see him find a goal. So as the reader, my personal reason for continuing to read is to see what he ends up finding as a life's purpose. Every character wants something, but it doesn't have to be like a big flashy thing. Sometimes the goal is just to find a goal, or sometimes the goal is just to get away from your parents. You don't need something really complex, but often the best characters have a big goal, a very easy to define and complex goal. Something that is going to drive them and force them to do difficult things to achieve that goal. Like it might be to protect your family at all costs in a dangerous world, or to protect your people if you're a ruler and the stakes are high and you have to make difficult decisions. Or it could be to become the best at something. Like if you have a story about somebody who wants to become an Olympic athlete and you start them when they're in high school, and you're going to carry them through some really intense life moments that are going to keep escalating. You want something like that where the goal is very clearly defined and the stakes are going to feel high, and you can find ways to keep escalating that goal. As they achieve one thing, you're going to give them another thing. But before we get too deep into that, I just wanted to make sure you guys are all aware of InkersCon 2026. If you are at that point in your writing journey where you are ready to start taking things seriously, especially with indie publishing, or maybe you are already there and starting to publish, I really can't recommend this conference enough. InkersCon is currently running. It started on May 30th and concludes on June 12th, but it's not too late to sign up. You'll actually get access to all the InkersCon materials for 6 years after the conference, and I know it's probably going to take me a while to work my way through them because there's a lot to take in with these panels, and I usually take notes and think about them for a while. They have really great speakers with a lot of experience. There are 24 classes for authors on all sorts of topics related to marketing, business, craft, and more. And they also have many live roundtables and sessions like Q&As with best-selling authors that you can also go back and watch later. Like just this past Saturday, they had one on writing deep, immersive point of view and one on creating unique and dynamic casts of characters. I am always really impressed by how much InkersCon delivers for the price. And if you use my affiliate code CozyCreative26, you'll also get $50 off. So the whole conference is only $199. And if you've signed up, let me know how it went for you. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Alfred has two goals. One of them is to become the respected heir to a family of black market potion dealers. They are an organized crime family, and he's the eldest son, and he wants to prove himself. The second goal is that he wants to preserve the history and legacy of magic. The world is modernizing, and magic is starting to become less magical, more commodified. A lot of the weird spells that people used to make are not seen as useful or profitable anymore, and just studying weird magic is becoming less common, and Alfred does not like that. He really loves magic for magic's own sake, so part of his reason to become a crime boss is to have a reason to find people who develop weird spells and find ways to sell them so that there'll be a reason for people to continue developing them and finding new weird magic and preserving the old magic. These two goals are complementary. They're both quite large, and they are also going to lead to naturally difficult choices because some of this magic is very illegal. So his business is a criminal enterprise, but the reader hopefully sympathizes with him because if you're a fantasy reader, you love magic too, and you want to see him find a way to preserve it. So even if he's selling a potion that's like, wow, that does bad things, you kind of understand why he's willing to deal in it. So that's a good goal. It's very clear. It can keep escalating. It can present difficult choices. And it's a combination of morally gray and sympathetic. If you can come up with a goal like that, it will be no surprise to me if you keep wanting to write about that character for a while. The second component to this goal is a conflict with the goal. I talk on this channel frequently about how there's a lot of writing advice that says that you need constant conflict. And I am not a fan of constant conflict. And the more I've matured as a writer, the more I've drawn away from having too much conflict in a book. I want the characters to have time to breathe. I want them to feel real. And I don't like reading books that are overly exhausting because something is happening on every page and every chapter is a crazy cliffhanger. It's just not my style. But I've had to think about how can I keep people hooked without having conflict on every page. So I boiled it down to you don't want conflict on every page, but you do want either conflict or change, or kind of a third element which can bring conflict or change, but I'm separating them out for the purposes of this, which is the curveball, or the plot twist. You don't want to have too many of those, but they are a tool in your arsenal that can help to kind of mix up the plot now and then. Having a core conflict that you can keep picking at and exploring different angles of, and that somehow plays into the theme of the story, makes for really good storytelling. Like some common core conflicts a character might have are duty to others versus self, taking a more spiritual path versus taking a more material path in life, choosing a path of violence versus a path of peace, and questions of power. What price do you pay to gain power, and what do you justify in order to protect other people? These are some conflicts that pop up frequently that can tie into the character's goal. Like if the main character is a member of a royal family and their main goal is to protect their people, then you have a conflict that gives them a lot of tough decisions about what price they would pay and what manner of power they're willing to seize or who they're willing to harm in order to protect their own people. Very common conflict in fantasy, and there's a reason why it's compelling and it works. So Alfred's conflict here, of course, is that he wants to prove himself and he wants to protect magic, but doing so is going to require a certain taste for violence and toughness, and he knows this going into it. He knows that when you're dealing with illegal magic that is dangerous and can potentially ruin people's lives, and there's a lot of money to be made in it, that he is going to have to be tough and he's going to make difficult decisions and he's going to have to hurt people. One example of this, I'm not going to get too deep into spoilers, but in book 2, which I'm almost done with, he gets into a situation where he is trying to work with a sorcerer who has a type of magic that he would like to deal in, but he then realizes that the sorcerer is already being exploited by some kind of local petty gang members. So he has to make the choice here of how violent he's willing to be to get a hold of this magic and protect the sorcerer he's trying to work with. In the scheme of things, that is not the most terrible choice that I could pose for him, because the reader is probably definitely not going to care if Alfred does end up taking out a petty gang member, but it does make the story interesting. It gives him inner conflict because nobody likes to just kill people or make decisions about how brutal they're willing to be with another person, and perhaps a preview of even more difficult choices he might have to make in the future. Although it is a cozy adjacent fantasy, so I'm trying not to give him the most absolutely horrific, brutal decisions, just to let you know if you've been considering reading it. But it is cozy adjacent, not like purely cozy. I could write a lot of books giving Alfred different ethical scenarios when it comes to dealing in magic, but when I think of a book where the author was not able to get very many books out of a core character conflict, Anne of Green Gables, a favorite series of mine, but it's a good example of a story that fizzled because the characters' inherent goals and conflict with goals kind of peter out as the books go on. In the original book, Anne of Green Gables, Anne very much wants to be loved and have a place to belong and find family, and she also runs into inherent conflicts because her wild imagination and just her natural spirit, the thing that has sustained her through difficult points in her life as an orphan, often comes into conflict with polite society. As Anne grows up across the books and she starts to mature and become more able to conform and work with what society expects of her and kind of tamp down her more eccentric impulses, shall we say, the books start to become very boring and Ella Montgomery shifted her focus to the kids instead of Anne, who just kind of fades in the background as a nice mom. Now, if Ella Montgomery had wanted to continue Anne's adventures, she could have set up something like, Anne wants to give her children a bohemian education that no one in town agrees with, and Marilla's always showing up like, Anne, what are you doing with those kids? And the local townspeople are tutting at her, and why are you raising those kids like that? Or she could have more seriously pursued her dream to be a writer and become unconventional, bohemian, childless, single. She could have done something that didn't fit in with the conventions of society and continued to bump up against that, and that would have probably produced more interesting books. But clearly, Ella Montgomery herself kind of settled into a regular domestic life and seemed to mostly like writing about children and younger women, like up through college age. She always seemed to kind of fizzle when she got past that, maybe because her own life fizzled a little bit when she got past that. But with Alfred, I see no sign of his life fizzling into boredom anytime soon, and he will continue to deal with both conflict and change that is not as tense, but is just part of natural life, and occasionally a bit of a curveball. And the third element that can make characters so compelling is that they have very strong strengths and they have very clear weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Some long series are carried by more of an everyman character, somebody who's like a proxy for the reader and is a bit of a blank slate that the reader can project themselves onto. And in that case, it's often the side characters that bring the flavor to the story. But if you want a story where the actual main character is very compelling, oftentimes it's someone who, I don't want to quite say larger than life, but they definitely are somebody you remember for how strong certain qualities are. They're not just a basic, bland, ordinary person. They're someone who often excels at a certain thing. Sometimes there's someone who is like a genius at some certain thing, or they have a really strong magical talent in fantasy, or they have a personality trait that really sticks out. Anne of Green Gables, for example, is kind of an apex character for like the imaginative girl. Everyone who's ever been an imaginative girl sees themselves in Anne. But Anne is also like almost over the top, but not so much that you don't believe that you could actually meet an Anne in real life. Or maybe you occasionally have met an Anne in real life. She's one of the stronger personalities you might meet, but she is still believable. And if you can kind of hit that note, that often makes for a very memorable character. So Alfred does have a very strong, clear strength. He's very extroverted and charming. He's a good salesperson. He's kind of schmoozy. He can talk to all kinds of different people, and he's very enthusiastic about magic, so he's just very good at getting people to want to work with him. Being charming and extroverted is like a magical power in and of itself, even though he doesn't really have any actual magical powers, or like very little. He also has some really good qualities that are complementary or like associated with his like actual strengths, like his stats. He's got a high charisma score, but he's also like a really loyal friend. He's really encouraging to his friends. So since this is kind of a found family story, there are a lot of moments where Alfred brings out the best in the people around him. So hopefully you would see like why people would be loyal to him even when he doesn't seem like he has the strongest position, because he's just somebody who's really good at bringing out the best in others so that they want to work for him and with him. But those talents and strengths and good qualities can also become a little annoying and unbelievable if they aren't balanced by equal vulnerabilities and weaknesses and bad points and flaws. And Alfred also has those in spades. For one thing, he's blind, so that's an obvious vulnerability that is a problem quite frequently, since he's in a very dangerous business and sometimes people are trying to harm him or kill him or just undermine him, and they have a very easy vulnerability that they can exploit. So this is where Alfred's ability to make friends and schmooze people can really come in handy, because he really needs loyal people around him. He's not always able to fight on his own, no matter how much he wants to, so he needs people that will defend him. But it's not just physical vulnerabilities. you also need some inherent character flaws and vulnerabilities. And Alfred is very proud. He can take the schmoozing a little too far. He can do stupid things just for the sake of wanting to prove himself. He's also very stubborn. He's a Taurus. And although he is a very good friend, sometimes he can also be a little oblivious. He's definitely someone who thinks that he kind of knows best and can be a little bit arrogant. He's a good listener, but there are definitely times where he just kind of decides what's going to happen or what he's going to do, and everyone else is just going to have to go along with it. He's a Taurus and an oldest child, so he's got an inherent bossiness to him. It seems like people who actually read The Potion Dealer were somewhat split, in fact, on whether they found Alfred really charming and likable or whether they liked one of the side characters better. Because, like, people who inherently like the character who like the most good don't always like Alfred the best because his bad qualities are also apparent. But that is also what can make him very fun to write. If you have a character that has some really endearing good qualities, but also some serious flaws that you can figure out ways to kind of challenge that character based around their inherent character flaws and find ways to make them have to deal with the darker sides of their character. That can make for really good storytelling. So those are the 3 core elements that I identified that not only make me want to keep writing about Alfred for multiple books, but I also can recognize that a lot of compelling characters in other stories have a lot of this themselves. One of my favorite stories for character work is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I think I can see all of these things I've talked about in each of the core characters in Avatar, that they each want something, that they each have to deal with a conflict, that their desires and the conflicts are not super simple or easy ones, but challenge their character. And they all have qualities that are really endearing and strong, and also they have some qualities that are vulnerabilities or a little annoying or something like that. I think what makes that story so compelling to me is that you have such a good cast in which every character in it embodies that mix of qualities. Which brings me just to a couple more things I kind of wrote down at the end that are maybe other ways to help you get to developing those kind of characters. One thing is just having a good cast of people around your character. It's all well and good having a good main character, but if they don't have good side characters around them, that often makes them fall flat. One of the things about the first chapters of The Potion Dealers is just in the first several chapters where Alfred appears, you get to see a different side of his personality with several different people. In the first chapter where he appears, he's with his right-hand man, George, and he's trying to get his hands on some spell books. And his mood with George is a little bit the boss and also very relaxed because him and George have known each other all their lives, and like he's very comfortable with George. Then you see him with his fiancée, Thessia, a little bit more of a tense relationship because it's an arranged marriage and he doesn't really love her, and she is they're both putting on a bit of a facade with each other. You briefly see him with his parents, which is clearly a very tense relationship, and then you see him meeting Livonia, the main female character, and how she's kind of a pleasant surprise to him and takes him slightly off guard and challenges him a little more than he's used to. Having very different characters and different relationships around a character where you can immediately kind of get to know different sides of them based on their relationships with other people makes them a lot more compelling. And I also think that often the best characters I've written come from trying something I've never tried before. I've written hundreds of characters in my life. So naturally, they're not all different from each other. A lot of them tend to fall into similar, I've kind of got some semi-stock characters in my arsenal. The types of characters that I just really like, and I want to reuse them with slight variations. It just kind of happens naturally, here's another, brooding, kind of stoic, dark magic guy who's got kind of, he's not very emotional, and you have to kind of crack him, Or you have like the girl who's like kind of fun and easygoing and freewheeling and she likes to have a drink. Like, I have multiples of many different types of characters. But one thing that when I created Alfred, although in some ways he was similar to past characters, I was at this point where I deliberately wanted to create a character who did not have a super traumatic past. His relationship with his parents can be difficult, and he's had to deal with the family curse that blinded him when he was an infant, and those are all problems for him. But inherently, if you asked him if he had a good childhood, he would still definitely say, yes, I did have a good childhood. I was running around playing games with George, and my parents loved me, and I had everything that I needed. Like, he was not a super traumatized character who was like orphaned and abused, and he didn't lose his eyesight in a horrible accident. He doesn't even remember it. Because I think he was the first character that I created where I was like, what would happen if I made someone who was not deeply traumatized, but the things they had to deal with were not rooted in like this intense past trauma, but were more about the present moment. I think that made him feel very fresh to me, and was part of the reason that I really liked him as a character. Another time I think of this happening is when I wrote one of my Reverse Harem Paranormal series, starting with Face Worn, one of the ferrymen is like a farm fairy, and he's really burly, and like he's definitely like a peasant fae, and he's kind of crude. I think he might be the only male character I've ever written who farts in the book. Don't quote me on that, but just if anyone's gonna fart, it would be Orson. And like he has a lot of chest hair. He's just like this real, salt of the earth. He's that kind of guy. I don't usually write those type of guys. My ideal man is David Bowie. But because Orson was so different than any other guy I'd ever written, I ended up like adoring him because he just felt like such a fresh character and such a surprise. He was one of my favorite characters I ever wrote during my 2 market years. So that's something to consider. It's often a good idea to try something different that you've never done before and just see if like maybe the fact that it's not your usual type makes it kind of work for you. Those are all my thoughts today, at least, on what makes for a compelling character, especially one for carrying a longer story. I would love to know any of your thoughts on this topic. What really gets you invested in your character and makes you want to keep writing about them for a long time? What is the quality that's like, oh yeah, that I really want to keep writing that. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I have been a professional author since 2009. If you'd like more from me, my members get 2 bonus videos per month voted on by you guys, which can be accessed through YouTube memberships, Patreon, and Substack. And don't forget to check out InkersCon and use my code CozyCreative26. If you'd like to read any of my books, of course, The Potion Dealers is my favorite book, and the Hidden Lands books are the ones I recommend first, but I have quite a lot of them. There's a link in the description. And I post every Sunday and sometimes midweek. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!